A rhythmic, high-pitched squeal echoed through the Korath medical wing, a sound usually reserved for reactor breaches or atmospheric venting. Beneath the glare of the sterilization lights, Nolan sat on the synthetic leather of the examination table, his thick thumb dragging slowly across the seam as if searching for a snag in the material. He did not look at the flashing red icons on the transparent slate. Instead, he watched the light reflect off the polished floor, his calloused fingertips ghosting over the edge of the metal frame with the practiced scrutiny of a man who knew the secret language of joints and bevels. "I am Dr. Valen, and I have never seen a baseline scan trigger a systemic quarantine. The surface is off by 2 millimeters, Nolan said, his voice level as he gestured to the corner of the table. "Could cause a pinch if someone isn't careful." I adjusted the calibration on the datapad, my secondary eye stalk twitching toward the hematological readout. "It is an examination table, Nolan, not a piece of furniture. Please keep your arm within the scanning field." "Right? Just saying. You see the grain, you respect the grain." Nolan sat perfectly still. He shrugged, a movement that sent a fresh wave of warnings across my display. To the human, this was a Tuesday morning. To my instruments, he was a walking combustion. I'm sharing the record of that day because it serves as a warning for us all. Pay close attention to what follows, for the line between safety and disaster is thinner than you think. The diagnostic matrix finalized its first deep tissue pass, and the result was a data cluster that made the cooling fans in my station kick into high gear. It wasn't just a high reading. It was a statistical impossibility. The screen displayed a localized zone of extreme caloric expenditure, a signature I had only seen in dying stars or stage 4 cellular meltdowns. The energy required to fuel such a cellular surge would consume the total biological reserves of a Korath adult in less than a standard day. My hands, usually steady across 40 years of xenobiological research, felt cold. According to every known metric of Korath medicine, Nolan was currently undergoing a catastrophic systemic biological collapse. "Something wrong with the machine?" Nolan asked. "The machine is functioning within nominal parameters," I lied, my voice tightening as I signaled the primary isolation vault. "Nolan, have you been exposed to any toxins or exotic radiation within the last 48 hours? "Just sawdust and some old varnish," he said, holding up his right hand. A tiny, faded pink blemish sat near the knuckle. He looked at the blemish with a faint smile, completely oblivious to the fact that, or perhaps my linguistic processors simply failed to find the word, his body was currently producing energy at a rate that should have left him a desiccated husk on the floor. I watched the live feed of his bone marrow. It was an active forge. Every second, millions of microscopic hunter-killer units were being stamped out and shoved into his bloodstream with a violence that made my own circulatory system throb in sympathy. I adjusted the datapad again, the transparent slate vibrating against my palm. He wasn't bleeding out. He wasn't dying. He was simply existing, and the math of his existence was dismantling the core principles of our biology. I signaled my assistant to evacuate the room. We weren't looking at a patient anymore. We were looking at a breach. The air in the medical wing grew heavy with the sharp, metallic tang of ionized oxygen as the atmospheric scrubbers surged to a frantic whine. High-frequency alarms flickered across the diagnostic station, but Nolan remained motionless, his eyes fixed on a minute grain of dust drifting through a shaft of sterile light. To the instruments, he was a biological wildfire, a system pouring out defensive cells at a rate that signaled imminent death. Valen's secondary heart throbbed against his ribs, the rhythm erratic as the medical director initiated the L2 containment protocol. Thick, lead-lined bulkheads slid shut with a bone-jarring thud, sealing the wing from the rest of the station. The Korath saw life as a series of delicate, static equilibria where every cell is a permanent resident in a peaceful city, but Nolan's biology was a frantic industrial slaughterhouse of planned obsolescence and relentless reinforcement. Within his veins, a legion of white blood cells surged like a planetary tide, engulfing simulated pathogens with a mindless, chemical hunger that required no command from his brain. They were born in the dark of his bones, lived for a few frantic hours of patrol, and were then liquidated to make room for the next generation of hunters. A cycle of violence so efficient it turned the sterile air of the room into a pressurized chamber of biological dread. Valen watched the numbers climb, his knuckles white against the control console. "Nolan!" Valen's voice crackled through the intercom, strained and hollow. "Your bone marrow is hemorrhaging leukocytes. We are seeing a mobilization of over 8 billion units in the current window. Your internal structure should be collapsing under the caloric strain." Nolan scratched the back of his neck and glanced toward the wall clock. "Is lunch coming soon?" Nolan asked, his brow furrowing in genuine confusion. "And yeah, 10 billion is the daily average. Doc, is that a problem? I mean, I feel fine. Better than fine, actually." 10 billion fresh soldiers were born before Valen could draw his next breath. The silence that followed was thick enough to taste. Valen's cognitive processors stuttered, attempting to reconcile the catastrophic event on the screen with the 34-year-old carpenter sitting calmly in the center of the kill zone. This was not a disease. It was not a meltdown or a mutation. It was a baseline. The Korath had spent eons perfecting sterile environments to avoid the need for such violence, but the human body was built to survive a world that never stopped trying to eat it. The escalation followed with irreversible speed. The local diagnostic data was sucked into the galactic network, triggering a Class 12 hazard flag that turned every monitor in the sector a bruised, warning purple. Humanity's designation shifted from candidate to pathogenic apex. Within 12 minutes, the Galactic Health Authority had issued a sector-wide directive. No human biological matter was to be integrated into the greater population. Their health was a state of permanent mobilization that would shred any other species from the inside out. Valen watched Nolan reach for a plastic cup of water, his large, calloused hands steady despite the chaotic red lights reflecting off the steel walls. The carpenter took a slow sip, his throat working as he swallowed, entirely unaware that he had just been reclassified as a biological weapon. Nolan's thumb traced the rim of the cup. The diagnostic datapad lay on a velvet-lined shelf inside a deep vacuum vault. A thick security seal obscured the screen, leaving only a faint, pulsing blue glow visible through the observation glass. Nolan's hand pressed against the reinforced door, leaving a single, oily smudge on the cold metal. A Korath sentry stood 4 paces back, his kinetic rifle held in a white-knuckled grip. The room remained perfectly silent.